truth was buried, power protected the guilty, and they almost got away with it. Until a broken man showed up, and everything burned. The rope was already scratching my neck when I realized no one was going to stop it. Not the sheriff, not the preacher, not the folks I'd hemmed dresses for since I was 14. Pause for a moment. If you were in her shoes, would anyone have stood up for you? If you're not sure, subscribe now, because the stories we tell might be closer to your life than you think. They just stood there, watching. Like I was a coyote they'd finally caught sniffing around their henhouse. I don't remember what the judge said. Something about theft, emerald necklace, value of justice. All I could hear was the creak of the trapdoor below me, the hiss of rope against raw skin, my own heartbeat loud as a hammer. I was 23, a seamstress, an orphan, and in 10 minutes I'd be a body swinging in the wind. Funny how quiet a town can get right before it kills someone. Bitter Creek ain't much, dust, wood, and pride. They say it's a God-fearing town, but I didn't see much God on their faces that morning. Just hunger, like watching me die would settle something inside them. They dressed me up like a show, hair brushed, dress pressed, rope measured, like I was part of some Sunday fair instead of a girl about to choke to death in front of children. I saw little Ellie Mae through the store window, pressed up against the glass. She used to bring me buttons she found in the dirt. Now she just stared, eyes wide. I wanted to scream at her to look away, but my mouth wouldn't open. My voice was gone. I thought of my mama. What little I remember. Soft hands, soap smell. Gone before I turned 7. I thought of all the nights I sat under lamplight, fingers bleeding, trying to finish some lady's skirt before morning. Trying to be good. Trying to be enough. Turns out it ain't goodness that saves you. It's who believes you, and no one believed me. Not when I said I saw Mrs. Blackwood bury something in her garden. Not when I told the lawyer she was trembling, looking over her shoulder like a cat that just knocked over a lamp. They all looked at me like I was dirt under their boots. A girl without parents, without land, without voice. That made me easy to throw away. The judge didn't even flinch when he sentenced me, didn't even look at me when he said the word guilty. He just tapped his watch and told the executioner to make it clean. Clean, like hanging a girl was just another chore. I remember the man behind me, Garrett, they said his name was, testing the trap door. Wood creaked, rope tightened. I tried to pray. I really did. But the words just wouldn't come. Maybe I was too scared. Maybe I'd run out of hope. Or maybe God had already turned his back. So I closed my eyes. Waited. That was the loneliest feeling I ever knew. Not the cell, not the cold nights, not even the trial where no one spoke for me. But that 1 second, rope around my neck, sun high in the sky, breath caught in my throat, and not one soul willing to say, maybe she didn't do it. That's when I gave up. That's when I knew it was over. And then, boots, heavy boots, clinking with spurs, coming slow, but steady, not hurried, not afraid. I opened one eye. A man was climbing the steps behind me, drunk maybe, hat crooked, coat dusty, looked like he'd slept in a ditch. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like trouble. The judge scowled. "This is a legal execution," he barked. "Move along." But the man didn't move along. He looked at me, really looked, like he saw something none of them did. Then he laughed, dry and bitter, and said, "Legal? You call this legal?" And just like that, the rope stopped scratching. My heart kept pounding. But for the first time in days, I felt it beat for something other than fear. Hope. Small, shaky, but real. I didn't know his name, didn't know his story, didn't even know if he could save me. But I knew one thing. He was the only man in Bitter Creek who didn't look away. And that meant everything. I kept asking myself one thing over and over like a prayer I couldn't finish. What did I do wrong? I wasn't born rich, wasn't born with a last name folks cared about, but I worked. God, did I work. Up before the sun, needle in hand before most folks even had their coffee. 14 years old and already sewing hems for women twice my age. Making their Sunday best while I wore the same 2 dresses all year round. No one noticed. No one asked how a girl like me kept food in her belly or rent on her room. I stitched my way through Bitter Creek, quiet, polite, invisible. That's how I survived, or so I thought. Truth is, I think I always knew the world didn't care much for girls like me, but I still believed in fairness, in the law, in good people. That belief, it's what broke me. Not the rope, not the lies, not even the trial where they all looked at me like I was something that crawled out from under their floorboards. No. What broke me was how easy it was. How easy it was for them to say, she did it. How easy it was for them to lock the cell, to write my name on that death list, to tighten the noose. Just like that. I didn't even get a real trial. Didn't get a lawyer who gave a damn. Didn't get one person to say, let's hear her side. It was over before I even knew I was in it. And the worst part? I saw it coming. That day, in the Blackwoods parlor, I was hemming her sleeves, like always. She stood up, walked outside, and I followed her with my eyes. She looked nervous, kept glancing over her shoulder like someone was watching. I crept to the window, watched her kneel in the garden, saw her pull out a small velvet pouch, the same pouch she'd worn around her neck earlier that day. She buried it, right there, under the lilac bush. I didn't say anything. Not then. Didn't want to make trouble. But when she screamed later, when she said her emerald necklace was gone, I knew. I knew what she'd done. I tried to speak up. Tried to tell Mr. Wells, the lawyer they gave me. He didn't even look up from his papers, said, "That ain't evidence, girl. That's desperation." I remember staring at the floor in that cold courthouse, thinking, maybe if I just stayed quiet, someone would help me. Maybe Mrs. Patterson, maybe old Mr. Mueller, maybe anyone. But they didn't. Because it's easier to believe the girl without a family took something shiny than to believe the judge's wife is a liar. I wasn't angry. Not yet. At first, I blamed myself, thought maybe I'd spoken out of turn. Maybe I should have stayed quiet. Or maybe I should have shouted louder. It's a strange thing, being blamed for something you didn't do. You start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, you deserve it anyway. That's what it does to you. Being powerless. It twists your thoughts, turns your reflection into something ugly. I couldn't sleep that first night in the cell. Sat on that cot, knees to my chest, shaking like a leaf in the wind. I kept hearing my own voice whisper, "You should have shut your mouth, Marlowe. You should have stayed invisible." Then again, what did being invisible ever get me? A rope around my neck and no one to stop it. I thought about running, digging my way out, or faking sickness, or screaming loud enough for the governor to hear. But I didn't, because deep down, I didn't believe it would change anything. That's the part I hate the most when I think back. Not the fear, not the shame, not even the rope. What I hate most is how I started to believe them. How I started to believe I was worth hanging. And that was the worst kind of prison. One no door can open. And just when I'd given up, just when I made peace with dying in front of folks who wouldn't even say my name again after, I heard those boots. Slow, heavy, spurs clicking like a ticking clock, every step louder than the judge's voice. At first, I didn't even look. Figured it was just the preacher come to say some words over me. Or maybe the sheriff, checking the rope was tight enough. But then the noise stopped. Right behind me. Close. I opened one eye. Turned my head just enough to see the man climbing the steps. Dusty brown duster. Boots scuffed to hell. Hat pulled low, like he'd been riding through storms. He looked like he hadn't shaved in days. Like he'd slept beside a cactus and lost. Drunk, I thought. Lord, just my luck. A drunk wants front row seats to watch me swing. Judge Blackwood looked irritated, like a kid whose game got interrupted. He waved the man off with that bored voice of his. "This is a legal execution. Move along, cowboy." But the man didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't apologize. He just looked up at me, and for a second, for the first time in all those long days, somebody actually saw me. Not the criminal, not the thief, not the orphan girl from the edge of town. Me. And that's when he spoke. "Legal?" he said, voice thick and scratchy, like whiskey and road dust. "You call this legal?" People in the crowd shifted. Some laughed under their breath. Others leaned in. The judge frowned. "She was caught stealing from my wife. The law is clear." That man laughed, but there wasn't a drop of humor in it. "Well, ain't that just tidy?" he said. "Judge, jury, and victim, all under one roof." I didn't breathe, didn't blink. I just listened. He wasn't defending me, not yet. But he was questioning, and in this town, that alone felt like a miracle. Then the judge threatened him, told him to move along or he'd be the next one up here. That's when the man reached into his coat. For a second I thought he was about to draw, and I thought, Lord, please don't let this turn bloody. But instead of a gun, he pulled out a badge. It caught the light just right, tarnished, old, but clear enough for everyone to see. U.S. Deputy Marshal. The square went silent. Even the children stopped whispering. I saw Judge Blackwood's face pale. His mouth opened, then shut again. This drunk-looking cowboy wasn't just anyone. He was law. Real law. From outside. I felt something stir in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. Tiny. Fragile. But it was there. The marshal tucked the badge away like it didn't matter. Then he turned to the crowd, started asking questions the lawyer never did. "Where's the necklace? Was it found on her? Did you search the house? Talk to anyone else?" No one answered, because the answers were all wrong. Judge Blackwood tried to shut it down, said I was guilty and that was that. But the marshal wasn't done. He walked to his horse, reached into his saddlebag, and when he pulled his hand out, I nearly fainted, because he was holding the necklace. That green fire I'll never forget. Emeralds shining in the sun, just like the ones they said I stole. He raised it up high. "Found this buried in the judge's garden," he said, loud and clear, "wrapped in a piece of silk. Funny place for stolen property, don't you think?" I could barely stand. The world tilted. My knees shook. He'd found it. He found what I saw, what I told the lawyer, what no one believed. My legs gave out and I sank to my knees. Tears came fast, not the scared kind, the kind you cry when the truth finally crawls out of the grave they tried to bury it in. Judge Blackwood barked something about lies, about planted evidence, said the marshal and I were in it together. But the marshal just shook his head. "I've never seen this girl before today," he said, "but I've seen plenty of crooked judges." That's when I noticed something. The crowd wasn't quiet anymore. They were talking, whispering. Old Mr. Mueller scratched his head. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, said she remembered me showing up at her house crying that night. Said I told her I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. Others nodded. I wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in my life, I saw the judge look scared, real scared. His lies were falling apart, right there in front of everyone. The marshal looked up at me again, didn't smile, didn't say anything, but I could tell he wasn't going to let them hang me. And I knew maybe I wasn't going to die today after all. But of course, it wasn't over. Not yet. The judge wasn't the kind of man to back down just because truth showed up holding a badge. He clenched his jaw, stepped forward like he still owned the whole damn town, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "That necklace was planted. This marshal's in on it." And for one sharp second, I saw the old fear come rushing back into the crowd. Because it's easier to believe what you're used to than admit you've been fooled. People started glancing at each other. Some looked down. Some looked back up at me, still on my knees, still tied, still a girl with no last name. I saw the sheriff shift uncomfortably. His hand hovered near his holster, but he didn't say a word. Nobody moved. Not yet. The marshal didn't raise his voice, didn't shout. He just turned to the judge and said, calm as river water, "You sure you want to keep lying, Judge? 'Cause I've got more." That's when he pulled out the silk cloth. It was fancy, real fancy, deep red with gold thread, the kind of fabric only Mrs. Blackwood wore on Sundays. He held it up so the wind caught it. Several women gasped. One even whispered, "That's from her parlor gown." I didn't have to say a thing. The necklace was buried in her husband's yard, wrapped in her dress. I looked at her window. She was standing behind the curtain, white-faced, frozen, guilt pouring off her like sweat. Still, Judge Blackwood didn't blink. He just spat on the ground and said, "You've all been fooled by a drunk and a thief." I almost laughed, because I realized right then he still thought he could talk his way out, that the town would rather stay blind than admit they'd nearly hung an innocent girl. That scared me more than the rope ever did, because I knew how easy it is for folks to look the other way, how simple it is to say, "Let's just finish what we started." But then, something changed. Mrs. Patterson, the school teacher, stepped forward again. She looked straight at the judge and said, "I remember that night. Marlowe came to my door shaking. She told me she saw something strange." Then Samuel Mueller, the storekeeper, nodded. "She told me too, asked if hiding the truth was a crime." And just like that, the air shifted. Truth had weight now, not just in one man's hands, but in voices, in memories, in people. Still, the judge wouldn't stop. He grabbed the marshal's arm and shouted, "She's guilty! You don't have jurisdiction here!" And that's when it happened. The marshal reached for his gun, slow, steady, and Judge Blackwood, he reached for his too. The whole square went dead quiet. No wind, no birds, not even a breath. Just the two of them, lawman and liar, one heartbeat away from turning this into a bloodbath. I couldn't breathe. I could barely think. Was this how it was going to end? Truth caught between two barrels? Me on the platform, still tied, still waiting? Then out of nowhere, a voice rang out. "Stop! Harrison, stop!" It came from the edge of the square. Mrs. Blackwood. She was running. Shoes half on, hair undone, tears streaking her cheeks. Everyone turned. The judge's arm dropped just a little. She was screaming, "She knows about Rebecca!" The name hit him like a bullet. He stumbled back. Whispers turned into gasps, because now we weren't just talking about a necklace. Now we were talking about secrets, big ones. She climbed the platform, still crying, and said, "Rebecca is alive. She's your first wife. You told this town she was dead, but she's not. I swear I could feel the ground shift under us. It wasn't about me anymore. This wasn't just about hanging a poor girl to cover a theft. This was about a man who built a life on lies, name, marriage, authority, everything. And suddenly, the noose around my neck? It wasn't the center of the story anymore. It was just the start of something much, much bigger. The marshal took a step forward, voice low, controlled. Your real name is Henry Blackstone. You stole 50,000 in government funds, fled Carson City, changed your name, and somehow wound up here, playing judge. The judge's hand fell away from his gun completely. He looked small then, not powerful, not dangerous, just old and exposed. I didn't move, still couldn't. But inside me, something cracked open. Not fear, not pain, just truth, rising up from the dirt like something wild finally set loose. And I realized, as the sheriff stepped up and slowly took the gun from Blackwood's hand, that the real noose wasn't around my neck. It was around his, and it had been tightening for years. So when the sheriff took that gun from Judge Blackwood's hand, when the crowd stepped back and no one rushed to defend him, I felt something shift inside me. Not just relief, not just that deep, shaky breath you take when you realize you might live. It was more than that. It was the first time in my whole damn life I didn't feel small. I still had the rope burn on my neck, still had my hands tied behind my back, still had dirt in my shoes and fear in my chest. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I saw it in their faces, the people below me, the ones who wouldn't meet my eyes a few minutes ago. Now they were staring straight at me, not with pity, not with guilt, but something else. Respect, maybe, or shame. I couldn't tell. All I knew was, they saw me now. I wasn't just the girl who sewed their curtains and patched their sleeves. I was the girl who'd almost died because she told the truth. And somehow, I was still standing. The marshal walked over. He didn't smile or say anything warm, just pulled a knife from his belt and started cutting the rope on my wrists. His hands were quick but gentle, like he'd done this before. When the rope dropped and my arms fell free, I didn't move right away. Felt like I didn't know how. Then he leaned in close and said, "You're all right now, Miss Thorne." And those words, they broke something in me I didn't even know was holding on. I collapsed forward, not from weakness, but because that was the first kind thing anyone had said to me in weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. He helped me sit down on the edge of the platform. I rubbed my wrists, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. Judge Blackwood, no, Henry Blackstone, was being walked down the steps in cuffs. Mrs. Blackwood stood off to the side, her face pale, her arms shaking. She hadn't run. She didn't try to deny anything. In a strange way, she looked more broken than him. The townsfolk were talking. Whispers turned to quiet arguments. Some still seemed stunned, others angry, like they were trying to piece together how long they'd been lied to, how deep the rot really went. And me? I just sat there, watching, listening, trying to remember how to feel human again. I didn't even notice Mrs. Patterson until she put her shawl around my shoulders. Didn't even hear Samuel Mueller say he'd sent his wife to bring me some hot coffee. But I heard the marshal's boots. He walked past me toward the sheriff. And then I heard them talk about going to the judge's house, said there might be more, said if he changed his name and faked his life, there had to be records, documents, proof, something about a ledger. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me. It never was. I was just the one who got caught in the middle of it. A pawn, a cover-up, a convenient little girl nobody would miss if she swung. And now that I was free, I couldn't walk away from what I knew. Not yet. Because if they were going to open up that house and pull back the curtain, they were going to find more. I didn't know how I knew. I just did. folks like Blackwood don't stop at one lie. They build castles out of 'em, and castles always have more than one secret wall. The marshal nodded at me before he left. Didn't ask me anything. Didn't need to. He knew I wasn't leaving town tonight. Neither was the truth. For the rest of that day, I sat inside the general store, wrapped in Mrs. Mueller's blanket, holding that warm coffee like it was the last good thing in the world. I barely touched it. My fingers wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that rope, felt it on my skin, heard the crowd holding their breath. But I also saw the moment the marshal walked up those steps, the way his boots landed solid, the way he looked at me like I mattered. That moment, that's what I clung to. That, and the fact that I lived. And living meant I could speak now. For myself. For whoever else that man had hurt. I wasn't just a seamstress anymore. I wasn't just a girl with dirt under her nails and no family name. I was someone who survived the noose, who held onto the truth even when no one believed her. And I swore, right there, sitting behind the store window with the fire flickering beside me, that if Blackwood had hurt anyone else, they'd hear from me too. Later that night, the town got quieter than I ever remembered. No saloon music, no barking dogs, no porch talk, just wind and questions. The marshal and Sheriff Morrison went to the judge's house, said they were going to search every drawer, every floorboard. I stayed at the store. Didn't feel right going home. Didn't feel like anywhere was mine yet. Mrs. Mueller brought me a wool blanket and a small bowl of soup. She didn't say much, just sat beside me for a while. Her presence felt warmer than the fire. I couldn't stop thinking. If that marshal hadn't shown up when he did, I wouldn't be breathing right now. I'd be buried in a box, labeled a thief, and no one would have ever known the truth. That thought kept circling in my head like a hawk that wouldn't leave. Then the bell above the door rang. Sheriff Morrison walked in first. His face looked pale, like he'd seen something bad. The marshal came next, holding a small leather book. He didn't say anything at first, just handed it to me. I stared down at it, confused. "Judge kept a ledger," he said finally. "Every lie, every bribe, every person he railroaded." I opened the cover. Neat handwriting. Dates, names. I turned one page, then another. And I stopped breathing. Right there, in ink clear as daylight, was a case from 2 years ago. The Hernandez family. I remembered them. Nice people, spoke soft, always nodded when they passed. Gone in a week. Judge said they were caught rustling cattle, but the ledger said different. Said he hanged the father and eldest boy, sold the mother and younger kids into work contracts, like they were livestock. I covered my mouth. The marshal pulled up a chair beside me. "You were lucky," he said. "Most weren't." And that's when I realized my survival came with a price. Knowing all this meant I couldn't just disappear. I couldn't pack a bag and head west like nothing happened. I asked, "How many?" He took a breath. "Too many. 30 names so far. Could be more." Sheriff Morrison sat down across from us. "I served under that man for 5 years," he said quietly. I didn't see it. I should have, but I didn't. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. We just sat there, all three of us, in that little store with the fire crackling and the truth laying wide open on the table. Later, they brought Judge Blackwood in for questioning. He didn't fight anymore, didn't scream like before. He just sat in that jail cell, staring at the floor, like all the lies had finally crushed him. The marshal wrote it all down, every word, every name, every stolen life. And me? I stood outside that jailhouse window, watching the man who tried to end me with a lie finally face something real. Justice, not the fake kind, Not the kind written on a rope, but the kind that lasts, the kind that counts. And for the first time since that noose scratched my skin, I felt free. A few days passed, but it still felt like that rope was around my neck. I'd wake up sweating, gasping, thinking I was back on that platform. Then I'd hear a rooster or smell coffee and remember I was still here, alive. But the weight didn't go away. Not when I walked down the street and folks stared, not when I heard whispers behind store doors, not even when they nodded and said they were glad I made it. Because I knew they weren't just thinking about me. They were thinking about what they almost did, what they let happen. And maybe that was justice. Maybe letting them carry that guilt was more punishment than anything I could say. But I still carried something too. That ledger never left my thoughts. 30 names, whole families, gone because it was easy, because they couldn't fight back, because nobody had shown up in time, like they did for me. That morning the marshal came back from the capital. He brought papers, official ones, said Judge Blackwood had confessed everything. He told them where he hid the money, named names, said he worked with ranchers, bounty hunters, even lawmen in other towns. It wasn't just Bitter Creek. It reached far beyond. The marshal looked tired, more than tired, worn down, like every confession he wrote chipped away at something inside him. I asked if he was okay. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, I should have found him sooner. And that hit me deep, because I'd said the same thing to myself, over and over. But none of this was our fault. The blame belonged to the man behind bars. Still, that didn't stop the ache. Later that afternoon, I went back to the square. The platform was still there, weathered wood, thick rope hanging loose, like it was waiting for someone else. I stood there for a long time, watching the wind tug at the boards. Then Tom Fletcher walked up behind me, said they were planning to tear it down that evening, said it didn't belong in Bitter Creek anymore. I nodded, didn't say much, just stared at that rope, thinking how close it came. Then I whispered, mostly to myself, burn it. Tom heard. He nodded. We will. That night, half the town came out with torches. The sheriff brought a bottle of kerosene. Mrs. Patterson said a prayer, and they lit it up. Flames swallowed that platform like it never deserved to stand in the first place. I didn't cheer, didn't cry, just stood beside the marshal, watching the past turn to ash. When it was done, the wind carried smoke into the hills, and Bitter Creek felt lighter, not healed, not yet, but lighter. And for the first time in a long while, I believed maybe things could change. Maybe this place, these people, even me, maybe we all still had a shot. A week later, I packed my things. Didn't have much, just a small bag, a few needles, 2 dresses, and that shawl Mrs. Patterson gave me. But it felt heavier than it should. Maybe because I was carrying more than fabric. I stood outside the store one last time, watched folks sweep their porches, hang laundry, go on like life hadn't almost turned rotten. I didn't blame them. That's what people do. They keep moving, even after something ugly. Sheriff Morrison came by to say goodbye. He looked different these days, straighter, quieter. He told me they'd appointed him temporary judge till the real one arrived. Said he didn't want the job, but felt like he owed it. I believed him. He asked where I was headed. I said, Denver maybe, or San Francisco, someplace where nobody knows my name. He tipped his hat and said, You'll be all right, Miss Thorne. I smiled. First time I'd smiled and meant it. Then the marshal showed up. He was leaning against the post outside Muller's store. arms crossed, hat pulled low like always. He nodded at me, said, "Stage leaves in 10 minutes." I looked at him for a long second, wanted to say something, anything that would explain how grateful I was. But all I got out was, "Why'd you stop?" He shrugged, didn't look at me when he answered. "Saw the way the judge looked at you. Wasn't right." Then he met my eyes and added, "And I've seen too many folks die quiet when someone should have said something." I swallowed hard, said, "You saved my life." He shook his head. "No, ma'am. You saved yourself. I just handed you the knife to cut the rope." I didn't argue. He wasn't the kind who liked fuss. The stage rolled up with dust and creaking wheels. I stepped toward it, then stopped, turned back and asked him, "What'll you do now?" He didn't hesitate. "Stay a while, help the new judge, sort through all this mess, maybe clean up a few more lies." I smiled again. Then I stepped onto that stagecoach, not just as a passenger, but as someone starting over. The ride out of Bitter Creek was quiet. I watched the town fade into the distance, watched the gallows burn all over again in my mind. And I made a promise. If I ever had a shop of my own, if I ever made a life somewhere new, I'd make space for girls like me, ones who didn't have names or voices or folks to believe them, because someone gave me a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. 6 months later, I opened a little seamstress shop in Denver. Nothing fancy, but clean, warm, honest. People came for thread and cloth, but some came just to sit, to talk. I listened, didn't ask questions, just made space. That was enough. And sometimes, on long afternoons when the light hits just right, I still feel the ghost of that rope on my neck, not as a scar, but as a reminder. They built that gallows for me, but it ended up hanging the truth they tried to bury. And I lived, so I could tell it. Sometimes the rope around your neck isn't made of hemp. It's made of silence, of injustice, of the world turning its back while your voice disappears into dust. When I listened to Marlo Thorne's story, I didn't just hear about a girl on a gallows. I heard a mirror cracking, a system collapsing, and a soul, beaten down, humiliated, choosing to stand even when her knees were buckling. And the truth? Most of us have felt a piece of that rope. Maybe not the noose, but the weight of being blamed for something we didn't do, of being dismissed, overlooked, silenced. Maybe it was at work, maybe in a relationship, maybe from people who were supposed to protect us, maybe from a world that only sees value in status and loud voices. 2. But here's the part that breaks me. Marlo didn't cry out for revenge. She didn't want blood. She just wanted someone to say, "I believe you." And that's what this world is starved for. Belief, compassion, courage to stand up even when the crowd stays silent. We like to think we'd be the marshal, storming in last minute, saving the day. But more often, we're the crowd, staring, wondering, looking away. That's the part that hurts. But it's also the part that teaches, because Marlo's story doesn't just warn us about corruption, it reminds us that silence enables it. That truth, no matter how small, can burn down the lies stacked up for years, and that survival isn't just about breathing, it's about fighting to be seen. So what do we do with that? Maybe we start by looking around. Who's the person in your life that no one listens to? Who's holding their breath, waiting for someone to believe them? Is it the coworker who gets blamed for things they didn't do? The kid in your neighborhood everyone avoids? The woman who stopped talking because no one ever heard her? We don't need to be marshals. We don't need a badge. All we need is the spine to say, "This isn't right," and the heart to ask, "What's your story?" That's the real rescue. That's the moment the rope starts to loosen. And for those of you who've been Marlo, who've been silenced, accused, made to feel worthless. Let me say this straight. You matter. Not because you fought back, not because you proved anything, but because you never should have had to. And if you're still standing, tired, angry, quiet, that's enough. You're enough. And you deserve a life beyond survival. A life where your voice builds things, not just defends them. A life where you help others escape their own nooses. Because in the end, Marlo walked away, not bitter, not broken. She built a life, and she made space for others to be heard. If that doesn't inspire us to be better, I don't know what will. So maybe today we choose to speak, to question, to believe, not when it's easy, but when it's needed. Because the gallows don't just disappear, we have to burn them together. And if this story moved you even just a little bit, comment truth. If you believe standing up matters, comment rope if you've ever felt like Marlo, fighting to be heard. Don't forget to hit subscribe so we can keep telling the stories that deserve a voice, stories that shine a light where others would rather look away. We've got more tales coming, real ones, raw ones, the kind that make you stop and feel something. And trust me, the next one will hit just as deep. Until then, stay kind, stay sharp, and never stay silent.